I remember a time when there wasn't a variety of vegan food in restaurants or the grocery store. Now there's an entire section and so many options to choose from. One of my favorite vegan foods is Tofurky. Our next guest is Seth Tibbot. I invited Seth on the podcast because of his huge contribution to the movement, both in terms of his food innovation and his support of the movement. As founder of Tofurky, he kickstarted the movement of meat alternatives that has served as a massive gateway for plant-based eating for meat eaters and vegans alike. Seth, it's a huge honor to have you here. We've been friends for a long time, so this is great.
Happy to be here.
So in my life, Seth, I have probably eaten about 300 pounds of Tofurky. I actually did the math. So before we get into the Tofurky and potatoes of this interview, I've got a very important question for you. What is your favorite Tofurky product?
Oh boy. Uh, I probably eat a lot of the deli sliced hickory and the ham. The new ham is really good. But the tofurkey roast, which started it all for us, also is you know seasonally delicious and a go-to for me. So per pound, it might be the roast, but for daily consumption, it's probably the deli slices. So,
In your book, you discuss the Tofurky moment. I would love it if you could tell me a bit more about what you meant by the Tofurky moment.
yeah, I started out making tempeh in 1980. That was the first commercial product that I made, and I had invested 2,500 of my personal savings, and I was making 100 pounds of tempeh in an 8-hour shift all by myself in the lonesome evening hours of the Hope Co-op in Forest Grove, Oregon. And then I moved up. I needed to get a bigger space, so I moved up here to an abandoned elementary school that I rented out for $150 a month, and it had no heat and frozen pipes. It hadn't been used for, it'd been just sitting there for 7 years. And so there was a lot of maintenance to do, and we got it rolling, but it did have a commercial kitchen that had drains and stainless steel sinks and everything. So I expanded, and I was living the dream, but losing my shirt, in terms of money. I was living on $300 a month for 10 years, the first 10 years of business. And the 7 of those years were spent living in a treehouse that I built because I didn't have money for rent. And so I was breaking even, but I wasn't able to pay myself or staff any kind of good benefits or pay. It was, um, I felt like I was a failure at business, which is what my Aunt Rosie had predicted when I went into business in 1980. I put in my uh, registration with the state of Oregon, and I went out to see her at Christmas, and I was excited, and I was telling her all about I was going to make tempeh and soybeans and mold, and she was like, stop right there. She was like this fiery redhead that I was terrified of as a child. And she goes, "This is a bad idea, Seth. This is a meat eating country, and it's always going to be a meat eating country. Nobody wants to eat your soybeans, especially not moldy ones." And I was like, oh my God, not really the vote of confidence that I was looking for, but thanks, Rosie. And, my mom was always like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. But she was a terrifying woman because she spoke her mind. She was a power woman, and so I began to think after 10 years, maybe Aunt Rosie's right, and maybe I need to find something else to do, because at that point I'd gotten married and we had had a kid, and we were, struggling as a family. My wife was working for the Forest Service at a sort of, you know, low paying job, really. And so I started trying to get out of the whole making food business, and thinking that I was a failure. My venue out was a treehouse book. I was going to write a treehouse book because I was living in the tree, and all these people were writing and said, "Oh, this is so cool, and I live in a tree too," and blah blah blah. And so I started doing that, but that didn't work out either. So I was like, well, I guess I go back to the tempeh mines, and I started, making different tempeh products and growing. And we were growing at that point, but we're still just barely breaking even and getting by. And I had always known that there was nothing really to eat at Thanksgiving for my own personal. Um, I would experience. I would go to these Thanksgiving parties, and people were like having this festive time, and they were all, it was a special meal that they ate just once sort of a year, not very often, and they were eating turkey. And I was trying to make like stuffed pumpkin, or I tried a gluten roast that you couldn't cut with a chainsaw, and it was really a problem. So um, I saw a friend of mine making Tofurky. It wasn't called Tofurky. It was called a Celebration Tofu Roast in Portland, and I bought one, and I thought it was pretty good. And I was like, oh, maybe we could. He was just selling like 35 of them a year in Portland, and so I said, I'm going to give this a go. And we went into business. He would sell me the roasts and the gravy. And then I had this burger that we had been working on that tasted like Thanksgiving. And lo and behold, I said, we can make these into drumsticks. So we had these 8 tempeh drumsticks and a tofu roast and gravy. And we called it Tofurky, which everybody said, that's a terrible name. You shouldn't do that. You should call it something serious like, stuffed tofu roast. How about that? And I was like, I've been trying to play it straight for so long that I just, and I'm getting nowhere. So I'm going to be who I am. And, I have the sense of humor, and we're going to bring that into the market. So I said, it's going to be Tofurky. And that was sort of the Tofurky moment. And after that first year when we sold 880, I had like time stood still for me, really. Like the Greeks have two names for time. They have Chronos, which is chronological time, and Kairos, which is this magic time when you think, oh, I can see my way through finally after all these years. And so it was like just had all of this great publicity and, you know, feedback cards we had put in every Tofurky, and people were like, "Oh, this is the product I've been waiting for 20 years. I'm not a second class citizen anymore. We love this." And so that was really the moment that changed my life.
That is such a beautiful story. I love how you faced multiple levels of adversity, yet you came through it. You figured out a way to make it happen. I love that you incorporated your sense of humor into the process and your great nature about yourself. You really injected that straight into the business, and I've seen that over the years. In fact, we've been friends for about 12 years now. I counted it up recently, and I've always seen you use your sense of humor in everything you do, and I think it really makes you so awesome. I've always admired you, but I know that your work goes back decades beyond that. Did you ever expect to become one of the leading voices in our community?
Well, I never really expected that, all I wanted to do when I first put in my registration for a tempeh product was I wanted to bring low on the food chain food to America because I was an environmentalist at the time, and I just wanted. I thought it was silly to feed all of these beautiful grains and legumes to animals and then have a very poor return, and not to mention the horror of killing an animal. So but it was really an environmental reason that got me going into the tempeh world. But it was also, I had very small dreams of I wanted to make like it'd be great if I could support myself, and a few other people. And if I could make $1,000 a month, like, whoa, that would be incredible. So those were my goals, really, was to be independent, because when I was working as a naturalist, for these government jobs, it was more like, um, people would come up to you and they'd be like, "Yeah, you're doing this with my money," and like, you know, it was just like I thought it would be liberating if I could say, you may think what I'm doing is weird, but I'm not I'm doing it with your money. I mean, if you want to buy my product, fine. So there was some liberation about taking care of myself and being independent. But over the years, I think Tofurky has morphed from being just a late night comedy joke to people into a leading voice in the plant based and a leading company in the plant based space. So I'm happy to see where it evolved to, even though that was not in the cards. In fact, there really wasn't a plant based space in 1980, in the supermarkets. There were no plant based anythings except for Oreos or accidentally, vegan stuff. And there was no plant based milks, no cheeses, no meats. It was really, you had to go to the Seventh day Adventist shop to get wham and little um, soy loin steaks and all these different products that they were making, but they weren't in the supermarket. So it's amazing to see, the whole course of history over 44 years that we've been in business to see what a change we've accomplished in relatively short amount of time, 40 years, right?
I went vegan in 2009, and let me tell you, the difference between then and now is like night and day. So I can only imagine how it was back in the day. 2024 is a completely different world. I also love that the goals you had for yourself were so small, yet what you achieved was so much beyond that. It must have just been beyond your wildest dreams to find all that success and to be embraced nationally and internationally.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 20-year overnight success story, I guess, trying to uh, just make ends meet and all that struggle, and then to have it turn around so quickly with Tofurky was really satisfying. But it's really, I think, you have to give a shout out to a lot of the unsung heroes that moved the plant-based movement forward. It isn't just commercial people that have been working on it. It's activists like yourself, and it's organizations like, Veganuary and PETA and all of these Mercy for Animals, on and on and on, farm sanctuaries that have really been sort of the unpaid marketing arms of all of these commercial places. So, at this point in my life, it's really gratifying and satisfying to me that I'm able to work with some of these great organizations and support them, as well as giving advice to some small startup vegan companies. But that's how I spend my days too now. I'm not involved in the commercial aspect of Tofurky. I actually technically retired in 2017, but I've really I'm involved with the mission of what I felt was the mission of Tofurky and supporting these great endeavors.
As one of the OGs, one of the pioneers in the vegan food space, how have you seen the vegan food landscape change over the last 40 years?
Yeah, well, um, it's really it's interesting, to look at the history of the plant-based food movement, and I think you see ups and downs. Like, I've been studying a lot of vegan history, and that's one of my pet projects. Is I'm working with the Vegan Museum, which is this Chicago-based group that is trying to put together, get vegan history out there in the world. But what I've seen in America is that there's been peaks and valleys. It isn't just a steady upward climb, which is the way most growth happens. And um, like, for instance, there was this great big push for vegetarianism in the 1890s, and Chicago was alive with vegetarian social clubs and restaurants, and a lot of different organizations were going. And that was when Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle, and the University of Chicago had a vegetarian football team that actually won this national championship in 1904. And so things were looking up, and they were going up and up. And then, boom, the world wars and the depressions happened, and it took them down. And then in the 1950s and 60s, there was quiet, but it was slowly growing. And then, with the 1970s, you had Diet for a Small Planet, the book that really turned around so many people and said that, we can eat comfortably on beans and grains. We don't need meat in order to survive. And it's animals are this terrible return on protein. You put all of these things, grains, into animals and get such minimal amount of protein. So I feel like there has been this growth in vegan foods and plant-based foods starting from the 1970s, and then slowly growing and growing. And then you hit 2017, and you had this hockey stick growth, is what they call it, with Beyond and Impossible. They brought all this new energy into the category, and they became the darlings of Wall Street. And the stock was crazy, and it was on all of the like TV finance shows. They were always talking about Beyond and plant-based. And then the stock reached a point where it was probably overvalued, and the stock of a lot of vegan companies went down. And um, I think we're in a correction period right now. There's challenges in the plant-based foods, and it's like everybody, the whole industry rose on this enthusiasm for like Beyond and Impossible, and all the noise that they were creating. Noise is good. I've always said we want all vegan brands to succeed. Why? Because there's a business reason. And the business reason is it's easier for us to place products when the category is hot than when the category is cold. But the other reason is, of course, it's our mission, to veganize the world, and that's bigger than any one brand can be. So now it, you're seeing the everybody's sort of riding the coattails down of um, Beyond and Impossible. And we're in the age of misinformation, and big meat is not sitting around twiddling their thumbs and watching market share you know, go down. I mean, they've got ag gag laws, labeling laws, like all of this stuff, which Tofurky, by the way, has now sued 5 states on labeling laws. And that's pretty badass, really. And that's the work of Jamie Athos, my stepson, who's running the company. And, so it's really a time, that I think it's defined by Gandhi. It's like first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. We're in the fight stage right now, which is one stage from winning, by the way. And but it's a very difficult time. And the supermarkets are not friendly at all towards vegan. They're shrinking their plant-based offerings a lot of times. And um, the stocks are depressed. There's companies that have gone through some really, really difficult times and are continuing. They're just holding on. So, but you know, there's other products on the horizon that are going to grow, and the category is going to come back stronger than ever, which is what it always does. But um, right now, it's a dip. So
I love how you frame that peaks and valleys. I agree we should never get too high or too low.
yeah, well, like I say, one hand washes the other. And I think that I've always thought that, businesses should be paying tribute in dollars and cents, but also in support of activism, because we're all on the same bus, I think, trying with the same ultimate goal. And I think that's been one of the key elements of Tofurky and still is. So I think that, you really can't have one without the other. I would hate to see, and I think it's a tough time now for the nonprofit segment as well. I think funds are really in short supply. Part of it's the economy, but part of it is just where people are sending their discretionary income. And I know in particular, some of these animal sanctuaries are struggling now to have funding. And that's one of the, key places. I love sanctuaries. People are like, yeah, there's only so many animals that they're saving because they have, what do they have? Like 30, 50, 100 animals. But, those amb- ambassadors are what really made me go from vegetarian or vegan-ish to vegan. So I saw it in my own life, and I think that they have a great ability to show people how animals really feel and are. And I think they're great vehicles of change. So it's very sad to see them struggle in particular. But um, there's it's a great movement, and it's a historic movement that's predates so many things. Like, you can go back to 600 BC and to the Jains and the Hindus and the Greeks and Pythagoras. Um, that it's just a thousands and thousands of year old movement. And so to read these headlines that say veganism's dead, or that's fad, it was a fad and it's over now. I mean, come on. I mean, if you look at the full course of history, it's like the what they're saying basically is, yeah, people have been talking about eating plant-based for 3,000 years, and then the stock market crashed for beyond, and so then it ended. Story's over. I mean, that's just like a crazy um, headline to read and a crazy outcome. So, uh, we're going to come back stronger than ever. One thing that's like interesting to me that's happening technologically in the vegan space now is 3D printed food. Have you had any of the 3D printed steaks or the salmon?
I have not, but I would love for you to tell me about it.
So the first product I had is a company called Redefine Meat, and I had it over in London, and it was at a restaurant, and they had a 3D printed steak, and it had the texture and the taste were amazing. And they have like these jets that put out what they call the blood, which is a mixture of oil and beet juice and all these other things. And then they have fat, and they have the structure, and they're using like pea protein and soy, and um, it's just amazing. So I've been watching them for the last couple of years, and then I went to the Expo West show in Anaheim in last month, and there's this company, Plantish is their name, and they're making a 3D printed salmon. And salmon, is just like this flaky texture that is really, I was like so curious, like, how in the world could you ever print like layers of this salmon? And I was blown away. The texture that they had on this salmon was just spot on. And it flaked off into these yummy little pieces. I thought that their taste was a little fishy, but they're working on it, and um, I just think that that's a big opportunity there, you know. I mean, will there one day in the future be 3D printers in everybody's house, and will they be piping in ingredients just like, you know, water and electricity? And you go down and what's for dinner? I think I'd like some chicken, and you know, the 3D printer prints it out, and you know, there you go. I mean,
One can hope. I think that's a future that I would love to be a part of. A future that doesn't involve cruelty to animals. The way I look at it is that creating a vegan world is like a village, and every villager has their own role to play. Do you have any recommendations of ways in which these villagers could play their role in the village to create a more compassionate world for animals?
yeah, well, everybody's got their own interests and their own skills and their own specialties. You know, some people are, you know, like Ofek Ron, who is the developer of this salmon product I was just talking about. You know, they're very skilled at that. But then there's also people that are just skilled in social media and getting the word out that way. And I think, you know, you've got to look at what your authentic um, skills are and where you can do the most good. But a lot of it too is just, you know, believing in yourself and in your mission, and not straying from that, you know, because it's a marathon. I mean, getting people off of eating meat into plant-based worlds, that's one of the biggest um, campaigns, I guess, that the world has ever taken on, because meat eating is very entrenched in, you know, political life and government support, subsidies, and just in the traditions of people. And so you're fighting a lot. And I think we just need a lot of warriors too that are just out, um, you know, delivering the message in whatever ways that they can. So it isn't just like you need a lab coat and be a food techie to um, be important in the world and to make important change. And uh, I think that just really rolling up your sleeves and every day trying to make incremental changes and uh, small little ways that you can is it's a big boat, and there's room for everybody and everybody's skills.
Love the way that's put, and the role that you played all those years ago and have for decades now. Can you tell me about the impact that you think Tofurky has had in the world?
Yeah, well, Tofurky it went boldly where no plant-based food had gone before, I guess. You know, in 1995 when it first came out, it just like we didn't have a PR budget. We didn't have, you know, millions of dollars because we were just growing step by step through not selling any equity, but we were doing it, you know, just out of loans and profits and growing like slowly. Um, so I think that, you know, having it made it into the lexicon and into conversations that you could have. You know, Thanksgiving is a very special day, and it's the day that everybody sits around the table and you talk about food. You know, Christmas is gifts and Thanksgiving is food, and what's everybody eating. And so Tofurky, it just got so much attention in the media, and it was on like talk shows, everything from the Today Show to the Tonight Show and everything in between. There was like um, funny little skits that were shown on Jimmy Kimmel and places like that. But it was like characters in a novel or on in movies would be like the fact that they were eating tofurkey said something about the person or the character in the novel. And it was just so widely um, known as a product. It made people stop and think. I think in ways that no other food at that time had gone. It was kind of like a precursor to all of the enthusiasm that came out of the, wave of Beyond Meat and those guys. So, um, but the difference was ours was like an organic thing because we we weren't hiring PR firms to, and we didn't have social media back then either. So it was just trying to engage customers with this quirky name and this fun thing. We ran contests like, uh, we don't know what tofurkeys look like in the wild. Like, tell us, show us the story. And we got all of these great art, entries about what tofurkeys look like in the wild. And only all out of like 100 or 200 entries, only two of them were like of plants. Like every other one was like turkeys, but they were made out of carrots and celery and they had eyes. And I was like, no, no, that's not right. And then this one person said, yeah, tofurkeys grow on trees and they fall in the fall in these roasts. And here's what they look like and everything. And we were like, yeah, that's the one. And so it was just trying to, and we had mentioned in the Wall Street Journal for that, and that was like that reaches out way beyond, to a broader niche than just people that are already on the plant-based train. So I think, we made inroads and got a lot of people thinking about their diet. We went outside uh, the already converted vegans, which punched above their weight, and we love them and we, service them too. But it was great to see, you know, mentioned, and where it really struck home to me, and where I felt like we had succeeded, and kind of like where my bootstrapping came to an end, and I felt like I had made it as a businessman. It was at the end of a big tofurkey season, and I was sitting there at the office, and I was just getting ready to go home. It was 7 o'clock at night, and the phone rang, and I was like, "Am I going to answer this? I kind of got to get to home." And I was like, "Okay, I'll answer it." And so I picked up the phone, and on the other end, I heard the words, "Seth, Seth," and I go, "Aunt Rosie, is that you?" And Aunt Rosie, had aged over the last 20 years, and she was living alone in her senior village. And it was, she was just like, I watch Jeopardy every night with my friend. And tonight, you were the $400 question on Jeopardy. It was like Thanksgiving alternative produced by Seth Tibbot, entrepreneur. And I was like, oh, really? And she was like, yeah, I knew it was such a good idea. And I was like, oh, thanks, Rosie. And, just the fact that she had come around from being like, I can't see any way that this is going to work, to seeing that, oh, wow, look at this. My nephew's on Jeopardy. And um, it made me think that there were other people that had grown through that same path to come from, no, these are silly, stupid products, to, wow, look at that. Maybe that's something I'll try.
That is beautiful. I love how it came full circle and your aunt finally came around and saw the light. I remember seeing Tofurky on Jeopardy and just being amazed by it, thinking how far we had come as a movement. So, what challenges and opportunities do you see in the future of the plant based market?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think that we've been so focused on um, knocking off meat directly, like for instance, in meat alternatives and cheese alternatives, we've lost a little bit of sight into the nutritional end of things. And I think bringing back, you know, producing tasty food that is also, I mean, like these can be like less fat, no cholesterol. There's a lot of nutritional value to them already, but there's also room to grow. Like I went to the plant-based food expo in London last November, and I I saw so much food that was just being crammed with coconut oil, because meat is so fatty that, you're trying to knock it off, so you're putting this in. I was like, I was yearning for Tofurky, which has some oil, but it's not, as crammed with oil as some of these new products that are coming out. And I actually got a little, GERD or a little stomach kind of weirdness from just eating all of this fatty kind of food. So, saturated fat, not really great for you. So I think that what I see now is, incorporating some of these more whole food and more into the ingredients and into the formulations. Just it's tough too because um, especially on sodium, like Tofurky deli slices are less sodium than their meat counterparts, but at the same time, if you're not eating meat, there's still um, a fair amount of sodium in them, so so we've been trying to um, cut back on that and still retain taste because the mantra for us has really been taste is king, values queen, everything else is marketing. And I think we need to have nutrition in there as a prince more and more of a focus on, having really, really tasty, but really, really healthy products at the same time. And that's like a tightrope to walk, but there's more and more, technology coming out that I think will help that. And um, but I like that there's also now, I think more of a you know, emphasis on some of these just whole food products and tasty burgers. I'm seeing some more R&D coming out like that. So I think that's one of the big challenges now that can possibly reignite the category and get it back up to making more and more friends within the meat eating world look at maybe I should be eating more of these plants, but it's hard too because people are really food is meant to be enjoyed, and there's great enjoyment in life, like it brings to people. So that's an important role to fill, and I think Tofurky's done a really good job at kind of balancing. It's everybody's wants to put the word processed. It's like the red letter, the scarlet letter, like the P on all of these foods. And it sort of annoys me because, they go, oh, well, meat is just one ingredient. And I'm like, yeah, but it's a terrible ingredient. Arsenic's one ingredient too. And you look at all of these, it's a terrible way to assess food. You look at the ingredients in Tofurky and you have tofu, you have garbanzo bean, you have white bean, and you have all of these, healthy things too. But there's a lot of ingredients. There's more than one ingredient. But um, I think that the trolls and the big meat misinformation machine have, had their they've made inroads by labeling everything that has more than one ingredient processed. And
I'm very excited about the future of food. And I just want to know, is there any way that people can get involved with your work or take action for animals with you?
yeah, I'm about to do a fundraiser. I've been doing. What my soft spot is feeding people free vegan food. I have two groups that I've been funding and working with closely. One in Uganda and one in Ukraine. And the Uganda guy is feeding free vegan meals to 250 school kids, at-risk school kids, that this is like their best meal of the day or their only meal of the day. And he also does vegan activism. He goes into the schools and talks about it and everything. And this is the Podstruka Foundation. And he's amazing. And then in Ukraine, there's these two sisters in Lviv, which is on the Polish border in western Ukraine, which is not the part that is getting the most action, although they've had missiles land 200 meters from their house and shake the windows and everything. But they've um, when everybody was leaving after Russia invaded, they stayed, and within 2 days of the war starting, they had a vegan kitchen up and running in the most disrupted time ever. And so they've kept this going now for 2.5 years almost. And they feed hundreds of refugees every day, all these meals. And I just sent them a bunch of tofu. I had these aseptic packs of tofu that they got. I sent them like 1,000 tofu that they can send out all over Ukraine, because it doesn't need refrigeration. And I sent them all these packs. So they just landed, and so they're dispensing them. But people doing good like that are just so inspiring to me, because they're not doing it for money or personal gain. They're doing it for a cause. And that's really thrilling. It's interesting to see the global scale of plant-based foods. Veganuary, I'm on the board of Veganuary. That's another great campaign that asks people to try vegan in January. They had last year pledges from all the countries in the world except for 3 countries. Do you know what 3 countries didn't have any Veganuary pledges?
No, but I do need to know. Please tell me.
North Korea, Swaziland, and Vatican City were the only 3 countries in the world where they didn't have any pledges. All the other countries had, and in most cases, thousands of pledges of people trying to do it. And it's great to see. Even like India this year was a big veganuary country. Everybody thinks India is like this incredible vegetarian country, and they do have a lot of vegetarian um, people, in the Hindu religion, but vegan, not so much. New Delhi is a city, one of the biggest cities in the world, and at over 1 billion people, I think, and it has 4 vegan restaurants. Oh, now one just dropped out, so there's 3 vegan restaurants in all of New Delhi. And so, but Veganuary has been able to tell the story, and they had great success and had thousands of pledges, and it was like the third or fourth most pledges of any country in the world this year. So um, it's great to see, you know, growth in uh, worldwide growth. I mean, this is not a Western phenomenon; it's a world phenomenon, and it's here to stay, and it's here to improve the life of people on the planet. And it's, I think, ultimately going to be our salvation as a species is getting off of this inefficient, cruel, and unhealthy system of eating and into a plant-based food, um, where it'll be the dominant paradigm in the future. I'm sure of it. So, all the people that are out there working so hard now are digging wells that other people will drink from in the future. And so it it's we are the future.
We are the future, and I believe that compassion is in all of us. So we don't need people to adopt some radical new worldview. We just need to get people to take action with the foods that they're eating. So I love that you throw your support behind these great organizations doing incredible work like Veganuary. I've promoted them in a variety of ways through social media. Veganuary is doing amazing work, as are the other two organizations you mentioned. So thank you for your decades of service in helping to move the ball forward for animals and for vegan food. Thank you so much, Seth, for all your insight.
Yeah, great to see you, John. And I've always been a fan of yours and your big heart and your effective altruism. It's amazing. And you're the real superstar. I'm just a commercial schleck, you know. You're the man.
It takes a village. Everybody's playing their own role in the village. We are all doing our own part.
Good. I'll give you that.
So I appreciate it, Seth. Good luck with everything. Seth's story is a great example of what perseverance looks like. His journey wasn't easy, but he didn't give up. Join me in the next episode and every week as I explore the personal journey of vegans and leaders and people who share a journey of perseverance, advocacy, and courage. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you felt like the conversation was meaningful, please share it with your family and friends. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to listen to upcoming episodes.